The notification came through on a Tuesday, which felt wrong somehow. Like bad news should at least have the decency to arrive on a Monday, when you're already bracing for the week ahead. I was at my desk on the 31st floor of Hargrove Capital's Chicago headquarters, reconciling Q3 expense reports, when my phone lit up with a calendar reminder I hadn't created. Orchids delivered to reception. Addressed, Ms. A. Mercer. I stared at it for a second. Then I went back to the spreadsheet. I don't have a boyfriend. I'm not seeing anyone. My mother sends gifts through Amazon, never flowers. My best friend Laurel thinks floral arrangements are a waste of money and will tell you so unprompted. There was no one in my life who would send me orchids. White ones, I discovered when I walked to reception 20 minutes later, arranged in a sleek black vase, with no card, no note, nothing but the clean scent of them filling the marble lobby, and Gwen at the front desk, looking at me like I'd been holding out on her. They came with a car service, she said. Driver dropped them, wouldn't give a name. I carried them back to my desk because I didn't know what else to do. I've worked for Nathan Hargrove for 3 years. 3 years, 1 month, and, at that point, about 16 days. I keep track the way you keep track of things that matter, without quite letting yourself admit they matter. He runs the private equity firm his grandfather founded, though the firm barely resembles what it was by the time Nathan took the helm at 32. He restructured it entirely, brought in new people, cut the dead weight, built something leaner and considerably more profitable. The kind of man who gets profiled in Forbes and gives one-word answers to the interviewer's most pointed questions. He's not warm, he's not unkind either. Not exactly, he's precise. Everything in his world has a correct place, a correct method, a correct outcome. I figured out early on that the best way to survive working for him was to become indispensable through sheer competence, and so that's what I did. I learn fast. I anticipate. I notice things. He noticed that I noticed things around month 2, and something shifted slightly in the way he looked at me. Like I'd passed a test he hadn't told me I was taking. I set the orchids on the corner of my desk, away from my monitors. Ms. Mercer. His voice came through the office intercom just before noon, and I recognized the particular flatness in it, the tone he uses when something has already irritated him, but he's choosing to be civil about it. The Whitmore Amendment. Walk me through your flagged items. I pulled up the file. The indemnification clause is too broad. It covers third-party claims they caused, which creates exposure if the Whitmore deal triggers regulatory review. I drafted alternative language. It's in the shared folder, tabbed in yellow. Silence. I also flagged the arbitration terms, I added. The venue selection gives their counsel home court advantage. If we're going this far in the deal, we should push back on that. Send me the red line. A pause, the flowers on your desk. I kept my eyes on my screen. An unexpected delivery. From unknown. Another pause, longer this time. Come in. I gathered my notes and walked into his office. Floor-to-ceiling windows. The Chicago skyline laid out like something designed to remind you how small you are. Nathan was standing at the glass with his back to me. Dark suit, shoulders squared, the particular stillness of someone who has trained himself to look unreadable. Sit, he said, without turning around. I sat. The Whitmore red line. He turned finally and looked at me the way he sometimes does, like he's reading something I haven't said aloud. You had it ready before I asked. You have a call with their counsel at 2. It seemed likely you'd want it. Something in his expression shifted fractionally. Efficient as always. He sat across from me, and we spent 20 minutes on the Whitmore Amendment. He asked sharp questions. I had sharp answers. It should have felt like every other morning in this office, and it mostly did, except for the thing I couldn't stop turning over in the back of my mind. Unknown sender. No card. White orchids. I wasn't expecting to think about it again. I did. Laurel ambushed me in the elevator at 12:30. She works in compliance, 2 floors down, and she has the gift of appearing wherever she's least expected. She took one look at my face and said, "You've got that thing where you're trying not to care about something. I always look like this. You always look competent. Right now you look like competent plus distracted. What happened?" I told her about the Orchids. Her eyebrows went up. From who? That's the question. She thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. It's Hargrove. It's not Hargrove, Avery. The man reviews the background checks of every contractor who sets foot on this floor personally. He once sent back a lunch order because the delivery guy wasn't on the approved vendor list. That was a security issue. He sat in on your performance review and gave you the raise before HR even finished the paperwork. She tilted her head. Normal employers don't do that. He values efficiency. He values you. She said it the way people state obvious facts, calmly and without theater. I'm just pointing that out. I changed the subject. The afternoon proceeded normally. Conference call, 2 drafting sessions, a minor crisis when a wire transfer for an ongoing acquisition got flagged by compliance. I resolved it in under an hour with 3 emails and 1 very direct phone call to the counterparty's outside counsel. Nathan passed my desk at 4:15 and didn't say anything, but he paused for exactly 2 seconds near the orchids. I felt it without looking up. At 5:45, when the floor was mostly empty, his head of security, a quiet, careful man named Cord who speaks in complete sentences only when absolutely necessary, appeared at my desk. Mr. Hargrove asked me to have the flowers moved to your car. They're fine here. Cord's expression didn't change. He was specific. I looked up. He wants them removed from the building. He wants them where you can keep an eye on them. His words. There was something in Cord's tone, not quite a warning, but an awareness. I nodded slowly and started packing up. By the time I reached the lobby, Nathan was already there. He came through the private elevator at the same moment I came through the main one, and for a second we both just stood there in the marble atrium, the orchids on the security desk between us. He looked at the flowers. His jaw was set. "I'll have those moved," he said to the security guard, his voice quiet and very controlled. "They're addressed to me," I said. He turned to look at me, and for a moment I saw something in his face that I'd never seen there before. Not the careful professional assessment, not the considered approval. Something rawer, less managed. It lasted about 2 seconds before he pulled it back. "Someone sent you flowers with no identification." He kept his voice level. "That's not romantic. That's a red flag. Or it's someone who's shy. Or it's someone who knew sending a name would make you ask questions they don't want to answer." He moved slightly closer, and I had to keep my feet still. "You're not curious about that?" "I'm curious about everything," I said. "That's what you pay me for." Something moved in his expression. "Go home, Avery. Cord will follow in a separate car." I opened my mouth. "It's not negotiable tonight." His voice dropped. "Please." Nathan Hargrove doesn't say please. I went home. The orchids sat on my kitchen counter, clean and strange, filling the apartment with their cool green scent. I live in a 1-bedroom in Lincoln Park. Not small exactly, but not meant for the kind of drama that seemed to be accumulating around me. I found a card tucked beneath the vase that I'd missed earlier, printed rather than handwritten, no signature. "For the woman who makes everyone around her sharper. I've been watching you work for some time. I'd like to meet." My phone rang 40 minutes later. Nathan's private number, the one he gave me 6 months ago for emergencies without explanation. "Did you find anything with the flowers?" No greeting, a card, just an initial W. Silence, then, "Forward me a photo, don't throw it away, Nathan." The name felt strange. I usually don't use it. "What's going on?" "I don't know yet, that's the problem." Another pause. "Lock your door, the deadbolt, not just the handle. Cord is in a car outside your building tonight." You can't, I already did. Good night, Avery." He hung up. I stood in my kitchen for a long moment, looking at the orchids. Then I locked the deadbolt. The next morning he was waiting at my desk when I arrived at 8:02, which had never happened before. The conference room he led me into was on the 32nd floor, a room I'd been in exactly twice in 3 years, both times to deliver documents that couldn't be emailed. Soundproofed. No external windows. He closed the door. The flowers were sent by a man named Wesley Crane. He set a thin folder on the table. He runs a logistics consulting firm out of Boston. Legitimate on the surface, well regarded. His firm has been actively trying to secure a contract with us for about 18 months, through normal channels, without success. I opened the folder. "You know him. I know his clients. Specifically, I know that 3 of his most lucrative accounts are companies I've been in quiet acquisition talks with over the last year." Nathan's voice was neutral in the way that meant it was costing him something to keep it that way. "We've been careful. Those conversations haven't gone public, but someone has been leaking information about our acquisition targets before we can move. The deals fall through or get poached. It's happened 4 times. The implication settled over me slowly. You think he's been using my access. I think he identified you as a potential source 8 months ago. I think the Orchids are an opening move. He looked at me steadily. I think he's been patient. I haven't spoken to him. I don't know him. I know, no hesitation. But he doesn't know that I know about him, which means he's going to try to make contact properly now. Follow the flowers with a direct approach. So, what do you want to do? He was quiet for a moment. Outside, muffled through the soundproofing, the ordinary noise of a Thursday morning. Phones, the elevator, someone laughing down the hall. I want you to meet with him, he said finally. I stared at him, monitored. With full support. You hear his offer, document it, and give me what I need to take this to the firm's outside counsel and, if warranted, the SEC. His gray eyes held mine. You've been processing our most sensitive acquisition research for 3 years. You understand these deals better than most of the junior partners. He thinks you're a poorly compensated asset who might be sympathetic to outside interest. Nathan's voice was even. He's wrong on both counts, but I need him to believe otherwise long enough to incriminate himself. And if I say no, then I handle it another way. He paused. A less clean way. I thought about what less clean meant from Nathan Hargrove. Then I thought about 4 deals, 4 teams of people who'd worked months on acquisitions that someone had quietly destroyed. I have conditions, I said. He blinked. Just once, barely perceptible, the closest thing to surprise he lets himself show. All right, you tell me everything about those 4 deals. Why they fell through, who got hurt, what you know. I held his gaze. I'm not walking into something without the full picture, agreed, and when this is over, we talk about what you just said. About me not being a poorly compensated asset. I watched his face carefully, because that sentence had more than one meaning. The silence that followed was different from his other silences. Not thinking silence. Something else. Agreed, he said again, quietly. We spent 3 days preparing. Cord walked me through the logistics of wearing a wire. Specifically, how to a small recording device integrated into a standard issue work badge wouldn't register on a casual visual check. Nathan's outside counsel, a sharp woman named Patricia Eng, briefed me on exactly what language would constitute criminal solicitation. I memorized it. Nathan sat through all of it, with barely contained tension, interrupting regularly with contingency scenarios, alternative plans, things that could go wrong. On the second evening, when everyone else had left, he found me in the conference room alone, reviewing a photo of Wesley Crane. You're studying him. Knowing how someone moves helps. I set the photo down. He'll try to seem reasonable, wronged. He'll frame it as justice, not espionage. Nathan was quiet. Then, you don't have to do this. We've been over this. I've been over it. You haven't weighed in on whether this is actually what you want. He moved to the other side of the table, and I noticed, not for the first time, that he always keeps a table between us unless something has cracked the usual protocol. This is my problem, my firm, my failure to catch this sooner. It's our firm, I said, and then stopped, because I hadn't meant to say it quite like that. He looked at me for a long moment. Avery. He said my name the way people say things they've been holding back. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. If it does, then you'll do what you always do when something goes wrong. I looked up at him. You'll fix it. Systematically, thoroughly, and with unreasonable efficiency. Something crossed his face. Not quite a smile. He has one of those, technically. I've seen it 3 times in 3 years. That's what you think of me. That's what I know of you. I held his gaze. Let me do this, Nathan. I'm not fragile. You've spent 3 years making sure I'm the most prepared person in the room. Let me be that person. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, Tuesday. Cord will be in the building. Eng will be monitoring the recording. I'll be. He stopped. Close. I know. I gathered my files. I'll see you tomorrow morning, Avery. I turned. When this is over. He said it carefully, like someone measuring weight. I meant what I said. About more than the compensation. I let the words sit there between us, real and unresolved. I know, I said again. I'll see you tomorrow. Wesley Crane was already at the table when I arrived at Monarch, a restaurant on the 42nd floor of a River North hotel, Tuesday at 7 p.m. He stood when he saw me, mid-40s, silver at his temples, the kind of even handsomeness that's more about upkeep than genetics. Easy smile, good suit. Avery. He extended his hand. Thank you for coming. I was starting to worry I'd overstepped with the flowers. They were unexpected, I said, taking my seat and the menu he offered. I'm still not sure why I'm here. Curiosity. He smiled. I'd guess you're not easily surprised, and someone managed to surprise you. That alone seemed worth exploring. I let the words sit there. He was good at this, leading without pushing, making you feel like you'd arrived at his conclusions yourself. You said you'd been watching me work, I said. That's a strange thing to put in a card. Honest, though. He settled back easily, comfortable. I've attended 3 conferences in the last 2 years where you were the person running the room, coordinating, redirecting, smoothing over the things that could have turned into incidents. You're exceptional at what you do. He paused. And you work for a man who I doubt has ever told you that. Nathan Hargrove is many things, I said carefully. Stingy with credit isn't one of them. A slight adjustment in his expression, almost imperceptible. He'd expected a different answer. Is that so? You seem loyal. I'm accurate. He smiled again, but it was a different smile. Tell me about your role. I've done my research, but there's a difference between what's on a job description and what someone actually does. And there it was, the smooth opening, the invitation to describe the scope of my access in my own words. I recognized it immediately, which meant I could play it exactly as Nathan's counsel had outlined, enough to seem credible, nothing that actually served him. I manage executive operations, I said. Calendar, correspondence, confidential documentation. I anticipate problems before they become problems. You process acquisition research. He said it conversationally, like something he already knew. The preliminary analysis, the target assessment. I imagine you have a very clear picture of where Hargrove Capital's interests lie at any given time. I have a clear picture of what lands on my desk. I met his eyes, which isn't the same as knowing Nathan's strategy. Of course not, though I'd guess someone like you, attentive, perceptive, picks up more than she's given credit for. His dark eyes held mine with the particular steadiness of someone who's very good at manufacturing intimacy. I'll be direct, Avery. I'm going to build a practice advising clients on M&A targets in the mid-market space. I'm looking for someone who understands deal flow in that world, someone who could provide early intelligence on where attention is being paid. There it was. Wrapped in corporate language, but there. You're describing insider information, I said. I'm describing industry awareness. The kind of thing that circulates informally in any functional market. He smiled. I'm not asking you to hand me documents, just patterns. Observations, and in exchange? A consulting relationship, substantial and off-book. He named a number. I kept my face still. Plus, and I want to be clear about this, if there comes a time when your current position becomes untenable, I can place you in any number of firms where your abilities would be better recognized. Untenable. He thought he was offering an exit ramp. He thought I was someone who wanted one. I'm going to need time to consider this, I said. Exactly the answer Nathan's counsel had scripted. Not a refusal, not an acceptance. Just enough uncertainty to bring him back. He looked satisfied. He thought that meant yes. Of course. He raised his glass. Take all the time you need. I'm a patient man. I know, I thought. I'm counting on it. The drive home, I sat in the back of Cord's SUV, feeling the particular exhaustion of performing for 2 hours straight. My phone buzzed before we'd cleared the hotel garage. Nathan, are you okay? I typed back. He made the offer, full solicitation. Exactly as expected, 3 dots appeared, disappeared. Then, I'll call you in 10 minutes. Well done, he did call. He listened to everything without interrupting, which is how I knew he was genuinely concerned. Nathan has questions for everything except the things that matter to him most. You can step back now, he said when I finished. We have enough to take to Eng. We have enough to file a complaint, I said. We don't have enough to connect him to the 4 poached deals. Not yet. I'd been thinking about this since I left the restaurant. He's careful. He'll deny the offer the moment he thinks I've recorded it, claim it was a misunderstanding, a hypothetical. We need him to actually receive something. Think it worked. Silence. Give me one more meeting, I said. I tell him I'm in. I provide something small. Information that sounds valuable but is either already public or deliberately misleading. He acts on it. That's the tie to the poached deals. That's dangerous. His voice was tight. If he realizes, he won't. He thinks I'm motivated by money and unappreciated. I paused. He's wrong about both, but I know how to make him believe he's right. A long pause. One more meeting, he said finally, and Cord is in the room. Posing as a restaurant patron, whatever it takes, but in the room, okay, Avery. His voice shifted in a way I'd learned to recognize, the space where he said real things. After this, we talk, we will, not professionally, not about compensation. He stopped. About what this actually is. What I actually, he stopped again. I know, I said softly, we will. I promise. I sat in my apartment that night, surrounded by the orchids, which had traveled with me, and thought about Nathan Hargrove in his glass penthouse above the city, doing the same quiet calculation I was doing, trying to figure out how to protect something you'd spent a long time pretending didn't exist. The second meeting happened on Thursday. A different restaurant, my suggestion, a wine bar in the West Loop with enough ambient noise to make surveillance plausible. Wesley arrived confident, certain he'd won. I let him believe it for exactly long enough. I've thought about your offer, I said, once we'd ordered. And there's a deal in preliminary stages, no public filings, no leaks. If I give you the target and you can act on it quietly. I paused, watching his expression sharpened with interest. That proves we can work together. What I gave him was a company name I'd fabricated in coordination with Nathan and Eng, a real company with a real trading history, but with no actual acquisition interest from Hargrove Capital. A controlled, documented piece of misinformation, delivered to someone who would immediately move on it. He did. 3 business days later, a shell account connected to one of Wesley's secondary LLCs, traced meticulously by Nathan's forensic accountant, made a series of option purchases on the company I'd named. The same pattern as the 4 previous deals, same timing structure, same account clustering. Patricia Eng had everything she needed. I was at my desk the following Tuesday when Nathan came out of his office, which he rarely does. He stopped in front of me and for a moment just looked at me, his expression unguarded in a way I wasn't used to. They arrested him this morning, he said. Seek wire fraud, the civil suits from the 4 deals will follow. His counsel is already looking for a cooperation deal. Good, I said. You did this. He said it quietly, directly. 3 years of impeccable work and then you did this on top of it. I looked up at him. We did this. Something shifted in his face. The same thing I'd seen in the lobby 3 weeks ago, back when this started. Raw. Less managed than usual. There's something I need to say to you, he said. And I need to say it outside of this office. Okay, tonight. I'll have a car sent at 7. I nodded. He went back into his office. Through the glass, I saw him stop at his desk with his hand flat on the surface, not moving. Then he sat down and went back to work. His apartment occupied the top 2 floors of a building in Gold Coast. I'd been to the lobby twice to drop documents and never upstairs. The elevator opened directly into the living space. High ceilings, the lake through floor-to-soiling glass. Books in actual stacks rather than decorative arrangements. A chess set by the window, mid-game. A framed photograph on the credenza of a woman with silver hair and his eyes. He'd changed. Dark slacks, a charcoal sweater, sleeves pushed up. The absence of a jacket and tie did something strange to the air between us. You're observing, he said from the kitchen where he was opening wine. Habit. The chess set is from my grandfather. I play through his old games when I can't sleep. He brought both glasses over and handed me one. The photograph is my grandmother. She taught me to read contracts before I could drive. She sounds formidable. She was the only person in my family who understood what I was actually trying to do with this firm. He was quiet for a moment. She died 4 years ago. I restructured the firm 6 months later. I'd been building the plan for a decade, but I couldn't start until... He stopped. Until I stopped waiting for her to tell me it was the right call. I held my glass and watched him. This man I'd spent 3 years reading and still only partly understood. You wanted to tell me something, I said gently. He set his glass down, looked at me. I owe you an apology first. He said it directly. No preamble. I've been aware for approximately 14 months that my feelings about you had moved outside any reasonable professional category. I chose to manage that through distance and protocol instead of honesty, which meant you spent those 14 months being held at arm's length by someone who had no good reason to do that, and it wasn't fair to you. I was very still. You're the only person in that building who pushes back when I'm wrong, he continued. His voice steadies and precise, the way he says the things he's been carrying for a while. You're the only person who walks into my office without visible anxiety. You anticipated a problem with the Hendricks deal in September that 3 of my senior partners missed. And you mentioned it in a one-line email that you didn't even flag as urgent because you assumed I'd understand its significance. He paused. I did understand. That was the morning I stopped being able to tell myself this was just professional respect. I set my glass down carefully. You also eat lunch at your desk every single day, he said, and something in his voice shifted, became less practiced. You keep a specific brand of tea in your desk drawer that I know you can't get anywhere near the office, which means you're going out of your way on weekends to have it available on Mondays. You tap your pen twice on your notepad when you're formulating an answer you're not certain I'll like. You've covered for my scheduling conflicts with external clients 14 times in 3 years by telling people I was in back-to-back calls when I was actually in a personal meeting I hadn't told you about, and you never once asked me what those meetings were. The room had gone quiet in a particular way. You trusted me, I said. I trusted you before I knew I was doing it. He moved closer, and I let myself stay still. And somewhere in 3 years of watching you be better at this than anyone I've ever worked with, better, honestly, than me at the things that matter between people, I realized you weren't just someone I trusted. You were the person I looked forward to every day. The one thing in a very complicated life that felt uncomplicated. I'm not uncomplicated. No, the corner of his mouth moved slightly. You're thoroughly complicated. I said you felt that way. There's a difference. I looked at him, this careful, controlled man standing in his careful, controlled apartment with his grandfather's chess set and his grandmother's photograph and his sleeves pushed up, and something in me stopped pretending. I've known since month 4, I said. He went very still. I knew in month 4. I decided in month 6 that it wasn't something I was going to act on because the power differential was real, and I wasn't going to be the assistant who complicated her boss's life. I held his gaze. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand that whatever this is, it was never one-sided. And I didn't stay for 3 years because I was hoping you'd eventually. I stayed because the work was real, and I was good at it. And you treated my competence like it mattered, not as a performance. Actually, he crossed the remaining distance between us and held my face in both hands, which was not a gesture I would have predicted from Nathan Hargrove, and it broke something open in my chest that I'd kept nailed shut for a very long time. Avery, he said quietly, just my name. I know, I said. He kissed me with the particular care of someone who's been making himself wait. It was nothing like I would have expected, and exactly right in ways I don't have good words for. When we pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine. This is complicated, he said. Everything worth having is. You'll need to move officially out of the direct report structure. Eng can restructure your role as an independent senior consultant to the firm. Same access, better title, and frankly, better compensation than I was giving you, which I should have corrected sooner. I'm aware, I said. I looked up market rates in year 2. He laughed. Actually laughed. Not the fractional adjustment that usually passed for one, but a real laugh, brief and genuine, and I thought, there it is. The thing I'd been cataloging for 3 years in tiny increments. We're going to be careful, he said when the laugh had settled. Not hidden. I'm not interested in hiding this. But careful, because there are people who will look for leverage in anything I care about, and what I care about now. He paused, deliberate. Includes you. I understand that. Do you? His thumbs traced my cheekbones. There will be people who assume you got your position through something other than merit. There will be competitors who will try to reach you to reach me. There will be days when the line between who we are here and who we are everywhere else gets harder to navigate. I know all of that, I said. I thought about it in month 6 when I was deciding whether to stay, and you stayed because the work mattered. Because you mattered, even when you were being professionally unreachable and slightly impossible. Slightly, he repeated, dry. I'm being generous. He smiled again. There it was. 3 times in 3 years, and now twice in 1 evening. The next weeks were careful ones. Nathan's forensic team finished documenting the scope of Wesley Crane's operation. 5 firms over 4 years, systematic and patient, the kind of corporate espionage that only works if you're playing a very long game. The SEC referral went to DOJ. There would be a trial. I would be asked to testify. Nathan told me on a Thursday evening in his apartment, his expression carefully controlled. I know, I said before he could apologize. I already talked to Eng. I'm prepared. You're always prepared. That's what you built, I said. 3 years of treating my preparation like it mattered made me prepared for this too. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I want you to know that regardless of how the trial goes, regardless of any professional complications, I'm not handling this threat by keeping distance from you. That was my first instinct, and I talked myself out of it. Good. It took me about 40 minutes. He looked at me directly. I want you to know that too. I'm not as controlled as I appear. I know, I said. I've been watching you for 3 years. The restructuring of my role took 6 weeks, mostly paperwork. On the day it was finalized, Nathan appeared at my desk. My desk, which was still outside his office, because there was no reason to change the physical layout, and we both liked it, and set down a single sheet of paper. It was the restructured title and compensation. I looked at it for a moment, then looked up at him. That's significantly above market rate, I said. It's commensurate with what you actually do. He looked at me steadily. I was underpaying you for 3 years, which I regret. But at the time I was also trying to maintain professional distance, and apparently that made me bad at basic math. You're terrible at basic math, I said. You have an entire team of analysts for a reason. I'm exceptional at advanced math. He tilted his head slightly. Dinner tonight. Not in the office. I know what dinner means, Nathan. I'm making sure. His expression was straight, but his eyes weren't. 7 o'clock. Cord will bring the car. He went back into his office. I sat at my desk on the 31st floor of Hargrove Capital, in the city I'd come to knowing exactly one person, at the job I'd taken because it seemed interesting, and kept revealing itself to be more than that in every direction. Professionally, personally, in ways I hadn't planned for and wouldn't trade. I thought about white orchids, and a card that said I've been watching you work, and how something sent to unsettle me had instead made visible something that had been building for 3 years, quiet and real, and waiting for the right moment to become something it already was. My phone lit up. Nathan, the Whitmore final closing is tomorrow. You'll want the 7 a.m. file. I pulled up the file and started reviewing. Some things don't change. Some things change completely without you noticing, and then one day you look up, and the thing you thought you were pretending not to feel is just the truest thing in your life. Obvious in retrospect, the way the most important things always are. I sent him a note at 8:47 p.m. Whitmore is clean. 7 a.m. is fine. And yes, tonight at 7. His response came immediately, I know.